Hello, dear participants. I guess we can get started. Let's check the sound and the picture. Please, if you can see and hear me well, put a plus in our chat box. Okay. I can see some pluses, so everything's fine. Tatiana, was it a plus? Okay, I see. Great. So, I guess then we can start. My name is Alexandra. I'm a methodologist at Skyeng.ru, and today I will be your host, and we are going to talk about how to make students speaking when they don't want to. Let's look at the structure of our webinar. As usual, at the beginning, for the first 40-45 minutes, I will be speaking and presenting the presentation. And after that, we'll have some time to answer your questions. So we'll have from 10 to 15 minutes to discuss the questions that you have. If you have the questions during the webinar, please leave them in a special section in the top right corner, вопросы. Or, if you have some questions, you can also leave them in the chat, but I don't promise to answer all the questions in the chat box, because it's too fast and I may miss your question. So if the question is really important, please go to the special section. Good. So I guess then we can start, and let's look what we are going to talk about today. The objectives of our webinar is to discuss some problems, some difficulties that students have with speaking. Also, we will look at some ideas how to consolidate grammar and vocabulary in speaking. And we are going to look at some interesting examples of tasks and activities to practice speaking. So I guess that we are going to have fun today because the topic is really interesting. So let's see why speaking is important and why we decided to dedicate the whole webinar for this. Well, first of all, speaking is one of the most important skills in any language because, well, we're all humans and we all communicate using our language orally. We don't write usually, yeah? So we need to speak. That's why when we learn a new language, speaking is one of the most important skills. Another reason is that speaking is one of the most frequent learning goals of our students. One is I want to learn to speak better, I want to learn to speak more confidently, and so on. So that's why speaking is really important. Another reason is that speaking is assessed in, I guess, any international English language exam or any other language exam, but we're speaking about English today. So it's really important to help our students to develop this skill so that they feel more confident in the exam, as the speaking part of IELTS or TOEFL can be really stressful for a student if he has no preparation. Another thing is that speaking happens to be the most challenging skill, as for many reasons, like language barrier. Lots of our students are afraid to speak English because they are afraid to make mistakes or to say something wrong, or they are sure that their knowledge is not good enough for speaking, and so on. Also, the problem can be in the lack of fluency or accuracy. It depends, but usually it's fluency. And in difficulty to choose the words, as some students say that when they start speaking another language, the most frequent problem is that They want to say something, but there are no right words in their head, so they can't start speaking actually. And also the reason why we decided to dedicate the whole webinar for this task is that it's not practiced enough in course books, or it's well, there are some speaking activities in course books, especially in more than ones, but very often teachers omit this part because they don't have time for it, or students are not really interested in these activities. So let's see what we can do about it. I hope that at the end of the webinar we will cover all the questions. So now the word is for you. Let's see what problems with speaking do your students usually face. Please leave your comments in the chat box and we'll see what are the most common problems you have. Oh, not you, but your students have. Please. Don't know the words, lack of thoughts, yeah. Oh, Victoria doesn't hear us. Poor vocabulary, lack of vocabulary, yes. Accuracy. Anna, are they afraid to make mistakes? That's why they're silent? Or what do you mean? Afraid of speaking? Beginners. Vocabulary. Most often it's, yeah, no right words and lack of vocabulary. No ideas. Yes, that's also a very common one. Yes. Okay. No ideas. Okay. Don't know what to say even in Russian. Oh, that's a common one. Lots of mistakes, I see. So they are afraid to make mistakes. To imagine something they don't know what to speak about. Okay. Vocabulary. Well, I see that the most common one is vocabulary, yeah? Lack of vocabulary, lack of words. And another one is lack of ideas. So let's see. Yes, no fantasy. Well, that's not about fantasy. We'll see what's the problem here. So, let's look at some widespread problems, and some of these you've already mentioned, and we're going to look at them in more details today and see how we can help our students. So first of all, I guess the most common problem we have with our students is that they are silent. Yeah, so I guess every teacher had this problem in the classroom when there are really a student who is completely reluctant to talk, and there are some reasons for that. So silent students can be introverts, and it's just their personality characteristic. We can't do a lot about it, but there are some techniques. Another reason is language barrier, or also they don't speak because they think that it's too difficult for them. And somebody mentioned the problem with beginners. They are afraid to speak because they think that they don't know enough to do that. One more problem is that students can be not interested in what they are talking about, or they are not interested in the topic of the lesson, and sometimes teachers, especially the beginning teachers, yeah, they don't know what to do with that. They don't know how to grade the task or how to make the topic more interesting. Another thing is that, well, in my practice, there were lots of people who just spoke. Yeah, they answered the questions, they did the activity, but they didn't use the target language. So usually when we practice speaking, we practice it not just for the sake of speaking. We need to practice some kind of vocabulary or grammar that we've learned at the lesson. That's why some of the students can ignore that, and they can use all the words they've used before, so they don't use the new ones. And I guess if you work especially in a group, or if you work with students who know your first language, or who are in a group and they know each other's first language, they switch to that language, and this is really a disaster. So we'll see how to work with that. We have some comments. Modern books. Sorry, I didn't catch that. Students may not be interested. Well, we'll see. We can adapt like any book for anything, but we'll see how to work with that. Okay, so let's see. Now we are going to look at these problems and the solutions, and then we'll cover that in more details. Well, first problem that we mentioned was about silent students, and we said that there are at least three reasons for that: introverts, language barrier, and too difficult. Yeah. So when you work with silent students, there are several things you can do. First of all, if you work with introverts, it's very important to take into consideration that they don't speak much, and they're not open even in their own language. That's why it's really important to give them time to think, to prepare their answer, and to get ready, and only then ask them to speak. If you work in a group, it's better not to start the task with an introvert. If you know that this student is an introvert, just give them some time to think. It's really important. Another problem you mentioned in the chat box and we had on our slide is that they don't have ideas, yeah? So they don't know what to talk about even in their own language. And this is where we can tell them that, well, we don't care about the truth. They can tell us anything, we won't check. The main reason for the speaking activity is to practice saying this in a safe environment of the classroom. So when they go out of the classroom and when they start using their language for their goals, yeah, they won't be so afraid and they will be more confident. If your student understands that, gradually they will start speaking. So just say to them that they don't need to tell you the truth. Just imagine the situation. They can imagine that they are some kind of character, yeah, of their favorite book or film, and tell about that. The main reason is to make them speaking. We'll come to the problems of these kind of students on a bit later, yeah. They don't like to imagine. Well, there are techniques to make them do that, okay? So not just imagine and that's it. We need to help them. If the problem is language barrier, when students just start translating from their own language into English and they're thinking too long and they're repeating their sentence or parts of the sentence in Russian first, for example, or any other L1 that they have, and then translate it into English, it also makes practicing speaking almost impossible. And in this case, well, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen at once. It takes time to re-educate our students, but we need to help our students understand that making mistakes is fine. It's okay, because this is how we learn. If they won't make mistakes, if they won't speak, and if they won't say anything at all, it will be worse than they speak and make mistakes. We need to create this safe environment in the classroom where students are not afraid of us. If they're afraid of mistakes, maybe in their previous experience or in your classroom they were overcorrected, and that's why they are afraid to make a mistake. So we need to fix this and make sure that they understand that here in the classroom it's fine to make mistakes, because when we practice we even need to make these mistakes, not to make them afterwards in the real world. How to help these students? Yeah, how to what things to use to help them? Well, if students don't have ideas of what to talk about, we can use substitution tables. I will show you in a while how it looks like. So where we just write some things, some target vocabulary, and we let students use these substitution tables to talk and to make sentences of their own. Especially it concerns like starters, elementary, beginner level students, well, and I guess intermediate can be also useful if they have this problem, yeah? So at the first stage we need to use these kind of things to help them organize their thoughts and take ideas from somewhere. Another option, we can provide them with useful phrases and words and expressions before the task. It's important because when you just say talk, well, they won't. Not all students can do that. So if we want them to use some target vocabulary or grammar, or if we just want them to start talking and to help them, we need to create this helping task where they will have like a list of useful vocabulary and words they can and should use when speaking. And of course give them some time to prepare. And one more technique is scaffolding, when we again provide students with some ideas, with some words, with some things. I'm sorry, what do they look like? Well, I mentioned that I will show you how they look like just in a while. Be patient. On the next slide we'll look at them, at the examples. So, the other problem we had is students who are not interested in the topic. So, to make the topic interesting for them, we can just vary this topic. We can talk about something else. We can change the question a bit or change the flow of discussion to make this task or topic more interesting and closer to the students' interests, background, and so on. Or we can use really provocative tasks and play the devil's advocate during the discussion to keep the discussion going and to give our students opportunity to say at least something, at least one idea. They will have at least like one idea or something to say. Really, if you use a very provocative question where there is no correct answer, they will start speaking. Another thing is, I mentioned already that if they don't use the necessary words and grammar, we also use substitution tables and useful phrases lists. And switching to the native language. Well, that's a problem, and again, we can't fix it like right away. So, if your students switch to their own language very often, it means that maybe, again, in their experience, their previous teacher or maybe you used too much of their native language at the lesson. So the first and the most important thing you can do is change your language in the classroom and not switch to L1 of your students. If you don't do that at your lessons, your students will stop doing that as well. Now let's look at the ideas, and now you can see the example of a substitution table. So what is that? For example, if you need to practice a vocabulary to describe people, like this picture here, first of all, you provide students with some visuals, some pictures to describe, and then you need to create something like that. So if you work offline, you're lucky, you have a whiteboard or blackboard or whatever, yeah, a board in your classroom. So you can prepare this thing beforehand, before the lesson. If you work online, you can use whiteboards, interactive online whiteboards or things like that, or you can just use the chat. So here you give them some options. So you need every student to practice these sentences. So say how old is the person, what kind of hair she has, and what is her weight, so to say, yeah? So you give the beginning of the sentence, and then you have some options. You give different pictures, and the student just chooses. So he looks at the picture and says something like, Mary is in her early 30s, I guess. Her hair is wavy, or straight, or black, or whatever is your target language. She is, well, as for me, a bit overweight, or you can say she's slim or she's skinny, and so on. So this will be this scaffolding task you use to help your students get the idea from somewhere, because if you don't do that, especially if the student is new, he won't know what to say, and thus you give him the idea what to talk about. This kind of tables can be used for anything, especially with beginner and elementary learners. You can write these helping phrases in the chat box in Skype or on the platform that you're using, and then your students will know what they should say about the picture. Also, these tables will help you to reduce your talking time. Just read, sorry, I don't have time to read this question because the chat is going crazy. This word suggested in it, nothing, what to do. Well, and they should read these words that are suggested here. I mean, like on this slide, we gave you only a few words, but you can put all the words you need in these substitution tables. It is a kind of grading task because you help your students to say something, especially if they are weak students. So first they do that. In the next stages of the lesson, in the next stages of speaking, they will make their own sentences. First they can practice on the pictures you give them, and then they can practice describing people around them in the classroom or their relatives if you teach one-to-one. Okay. Yes, Valentina, you're right. They're really good at the beginning of the topic when the students are not confident enough with the new vocabulary. You've just introduced the vocabulary, and then you give them the opportunity to practice. Okay, now let's look at the next one, which is the use of useful phrases. Again, when your students need to use some target vocabulary at the lesson, you can provide them with a list of words and expressions they should use. You can do that like this. You ask them to speak about something, and the task is to use as many words and phrases from this lesson or that they have learned as possible. When they use the phrase, you just you cross it out from the list, and the students know that they used this and that phrase, but they should use this and that phrase in their next sentences. It really helps, especially when you get your students ready for the exams where they need to enlarge their vocabulary and use the vocabulary which is like in their passive knowledge, to make it more active. So it's really nice when, again, if you work offline, you can prepare these lists of words, and students can cross them out from their own lists, or you can write again it on the board and cross it out from the board. If you work online, you can use online whiteboards for that. Another idea is scaffolding. What is that? Again, if your student has no idea what to talk about when you ask the person about their plans and they don't know what to say, you can help them with some more questions. So how it looks like is you ask student the questions like in this picture. The student gives you separate answers to every question. And then at the end, you ask the student to gather all the answers he has just given you and to make like the speech. Yeah. So you asked in this piece, in this example on our slide, you can see only 3 questions, but there can be more. So you ask these separate questions to your student. He gives you these answers. You correct. He repeats the correct answers, and then at the end you say, and now please talk for 1 minute about your plans for today's evening, as for this example, or talk for 1 minute about, and then you say the topic which you want them to talk about. So this way your student has already practiced saying all this, but it's like a brainstorm of ideas, yeah? It really works well with lower level students or students who are not confident or who have a really strong language barrier and are afraid of speaking. Or students who say that they have no idea what to talk about. When they answer one question, you like grab the idea from this answer and ask another question. Hear the answer, ask another question, and thus you help them build these ideas. And then you ask them to say like all the sentences together. Right. Okay, now, as we say, as we already mentioned, that speaking is the most important thing we can imagine, yeah, in the lesson. It is really important to work with speaking at any, at any stage of the lesson. And as we work, like I'm speaking now about communicative method because we use that in our school. In communicative methodology, we work with integrated approach. It means that it doesn't matter what you're practicing or what you're doing now. If you're working on listening, on reading, on grammar, or on vocabulary, all these stages should include some speaking. Here on the slide we have that they should all end in speaking, and that's natural. But they should not only end but also start with speaking. There should be speaking in the middle of these stages and so on. So let's look at how this works. How can we work with speaking like in the middle of reading or listening? So here you can see an example of a post-reading activity. But this idea can be used not only for post-reading but also for post-listening activities. So, for example, you've read a text about the difference between Russian culture and British culture. This is an example from our platform. The text is called Culture Shock. So you read the text, you did the comprehension questions, and then you need to practice speaking. So, the idea we have here is that you ask the student to compare attitude, to compare the ideas, the difference between English attitude to manners and attitude to manners in his own country. It doesn't matter what country it is, yeah? And again, you offer some questions to make the conversation going. So if the student doesn't know what to talk about at once, you can ask what kind of polite words do we use in English? What kind of polite words do we use in your own language? Do we use them at the same situations? How often do we use them? Or is it necessary to use them in this or that situation? Thus you build the discussion on the on the topic of the text, so they don't take the ideas just off the top of their head. They know what to talk about because they have read the text, and they know what kind of things they should discuss. Of course, you provide some questions for them to help, and they can use the vocabulary and some phrases from the text to help them when you worked with it. Also, this can be done as a pre-reading or pre-listening task when you give them, for example, a title of their text or audio program and ask them to predict what can it be about or what they know about the topic. So it really works well. Don't forget about that. Another examples of post-reading and post-listening tasks are you can personalize the topic, of course, so you can ask for the student's view and opinion on this. And again, you should make sure that your students understand that there is no right answer to the question. You just ask for their opinion. You ask about their experience. Well, have they ever been in this situation like that or something like this? You can give again some like templates for them to talk about, like what was the most interesting or the most surprising or the most shocking about this text. So you give this sentence for them and they just think for a moment and give you their opinion. On the basis of texts and listening tasks, there can be different role plays. For example, if the text or listening was on some like interesting topic, if it's listening, you can just use the script and role play the dialogue, change something in it. If it's reading, they can pretend to be some characters of this story that you read and role play using some words and phrases from it. And also they can give you an alternative ending to the story. I love this task as a homework. So you can ask your students to think over how the story could end in like parallel universe. Another way is retelling, but this is arguable. You just don't need to make them retell the text just for the sake of retelling. You need to ask them to do that for some communicative aim. For example, like imagine that you have read a story and now your I don't know, friend asks you about this story and you need to retell them it so they can decide if they want to read this book or not. So this is really helpful. Now, if you work with vocabulary and grammar, you also need to end these stages of the lesson in speaking. It's really important. For example, in this picture, on this slide, you can see an example from our platform again. So the topic was about sport and about cheating in sport. So you could ask students to talk either on a time when they cheated in their life, or a time when they saw some kind of sports event, exciting one, and they need to describe it. So in this picture you can see that the target grammar is past tenses, mainly past continuous and past simple. And the language is again on the basis of the text, which was earlier on this stage, or so they can just decide what to speak about, either the one part of the lesson, cheating, or either sports. So you give them a right to decide. Now, again, more examples of grammar and vocabulary. When you learn a new language, like when you teach new vocabulary, you can ask students to make sentences with these new words. But again, they should be with communicative aim. Usually, I ask my students some questions, and there is one thing they should remember. They have to answer my questions using one of the new words from the list that we've just learned. We can give them prompts for responses. For example, if you need to practice would like to offer help with problems, you can give them an idea, and they should answer you with this target language. For example, you say, "I'm thirsty." They say, "Would you like a drink?" You say, "My tea is cold." You say, like, "Would you like a new one?" and so on. So if you work in a group, it's even easier. They work in pairs, or they work in group and in pairs, and so on. So it's even easier. And you can also give situations for a role play. For example, if you need to practice going to, you can ask them to imagine that they are a leader of a new government, and you have to present, for example, your policies to the parliament and say what you're going to do when you are on the post, and use this phrase "going to" in their answers. So thus they have a meaningful situation, what they should do, and you can tailor this task according to the interests and goals of your student. For example, if your student is a boss in his company, and he conducts some meetings with his employees, he can give this speech to his workers, discussing the plans of the company for the next 3 months, and so on. So you can tailor this according to the needs of your students. It can be anything, really. Now, it is really important to remember that our students should practice not only monologues, but also dialogues, and vice versa. So there shouldn't be only one kind of speaking in the lesson. So if you work one-to-one, it's really important to remember to practice dialogues too. So when you do that, you can help your students like we see in this slide. We can help them with drilling. But when you work with grammar, drilling is based on accuracy. So you just drill the forms, and there is no communicative aim. When you drill for the speaking exercise, it should be for the development of fluency. So, for example, if you want your students to use a certain phrase or phrases in their speaking, you can practice this phrase slowly in a safe environment, in safe conditions, saying, for example, the phrase "that would be nice." First, you ask the students to repeat together as a class, then individually, one by one, then they practice it in their speaking. And another way to prepare them for a dialogue or for a monologue is to use written tasks. Yes, we use writing for speaking sometimes. It really works well with teenagers when you ask them to take a piece of paper and chat on this piece of paper. So one student writes one line, another student answers this line, and they continue their dialogue. They build it up first on paper. Then they get ready, and they can role play it in front of the class, or if you work in a mini group, they just role play it in front of you. So it can be anything. Now, as we have not so much time left, and yeah, I'm passionate about the topic, so I talk too much, we are going to look at some examples of interesting speaking tasks, not usual, which you can use to make your lessons more interesting and meaningful, and which can help you to make every student speaking. I guess one thing that works all the time is using visuals. I like to find some kind of slides or interesting photos on the internet and use it as either as a warm-up activity or maybe for building up the further discussion in the lesson. To keep the discussion going and to make them really engaged in the discussion, I recommend to choose very unusual and, so to say, problematic pictures, because thus they will talk about many things and it will be more interesting. For example, like the picture in this on this slide, you can see that it's not clear from the first sight what's going on there. So you can build a lot of different things on this picture. So you can discuss the social issues. So you can discuss lots of different topics based on it, and you can also provide your students with a set of questions and with a list of useful vocabulary for that. It's really important, again, to use authentic material, and Lyubov can't see the picture. It's on the slide. On the right, it's round. If you can't see it, I can give you a link in the chat box, but it really doesn't matter like what kind of picture you use. But here it is. You can click just on the picture, open it in the next. Okay. So again, the questions you can ask about the picture depend on what you want to practice. So it's up to you. It's your lesson. Be creative. Another thing, it's like questions using quotes. I love using them as a warm-up. You prepare some kind of quote, you give students some useful phrases to express their opinion on that, and they start saying what they think about it. Do they agree or disagree? Is it possible? Is it a good idea? Do they do like that? And so on. So again, it's you can find a quote online on any topic of famous people or just anonymous internet dwellers and so on. So it can be anything. And it's a great way to practice phrases to express your opinion. The same thing is when you get your students ready for debates. It's important to prepare them for that. Again, we give some different useful phrases for agreeing and disagreeing. If you have a debate, if you're planning the debate for your next lesson, it's a good idea to give them these phrases as a homework to look through. And also, you give some useful language which they should use, and you do as I showed before. You just give them the list, they use it, you cross it out, and so on. So it's important to really give them some time to prepare. So for example, when you do that on a speaking lesson and you've discussed some kind of topic and now you want to organize a debate, if the class is really indecisive and you know that everyone wants to agree with some kind of problem, or everyone wants to disagree, it's a good idea for you to decide beforehand who will be for and who will be against this topic, because otherwise it might take too much time. I like to make people who I know that would agree with this sentence, for example, I like to separate them in the group where they should disagree and give some arguments for that. It really makes them think, and you can also ask them, if you have a big group, you can ask them that if you are for or if you are against, it doesn't matter. You need to prepare, for example, at least 2 arguments in favor or against. You need to prepare at least 3 arguments in favor or against this sentence. Give them some time to get ready. You can, like, if you work offline, you can walk around, help them. And then they will be already prepared. So when they report their ideas, they already have them, and it's not so scary for them to speak. Now we have one more interesting idea, is show and tell. So what is that? Very often you have tasks like that, that you have a group of people and you want them to discuss something and they don't have an idea. But if you work with your students for some time, I'm sure you know their interests, you know what they're passionate about. So to make them speaking, you can use a task like this. I use it all the time, especially with teenage learners, because they love it. You give them the task. Usually it should be a homework because it takes time. They should bring something to the classroom. It can be anything. It can be a book or a CD, or it can be some souvenir from their last trip. Anything really, it doesn't matter. But you give them a set of questions, what they should cover in their speech. You give them a time limit. For example, you should give a speech for 2 minutes or 1 minute if they are really beginners, or you should describe it for 3 minutes, and so on. It all depends. So they bring this object into the classroom. Usually when you ask them to do that, they bring something really important to them, and when people talk about something that's important and interesting to them, believe me, they will find words and ideas and things to talk about. So for example, my students like to bring books into the classroom or some souvenirs from the trips, and they need to describe what is it, why do they like it, if it's a souvenir, why they bought it, how long they have had it, how did they get it, and so on. So you can provide them with a list of questions using any form and any language that you would like them to practice. So if you for example, learn the difference between past simple and present perfect, you can include questions both in past simple and present perfect into this task, and so on. So it can be anything, and it's just your creation. So you can tailor this activity for the students' needs. And it really makes them speaking, and this experience is something that they won't forget. Yeah. One of my very young learners once described, it was my online student, and she brought her cat to the lesson, and she put it on the table so I could see her in the cat in the camera, and then she started describing it. So this was a really weak student, but when she was speaking and when she was describing her cat, I was really surprised with how much she really knows and how much is there in her head but was not used during other lessons and other activities. So another very interesting task, which also is better to be set as a homework first, is to give a project. So lots of adult learners, I guess you know, don't like doing their homework, like boring exercises, writing, and so on. So an alternative for this can be a project. What it is? It's like, again, it can be anything, but as an example on this picture, for example, you've discussed some fashion designers during the lesson, and you have some kind of work with biography of some of them and so on. And you know that your student is interested in the topic. So to make them speak more, you can ask them to go online, choose any fashion designer they want. It can be applied to actors, writers, I don't know, footballers, anyone, really, it can be anything. They go find some information on this person. It should be authentic, so they just use internet in English. They find this information on different websites, and they prepare a story about this person on the basis of the text you had during the lesson. And it really helps students who can't think of what to talk about right away during the lesson. But when you assign this as a homework, they have time to think. They have time to decide who they are going to talk about, what they are going to tell about this person. Again, if you work online, you can ask them to show you the picture, or you can make this task even more interesting. You can ask them to prepare some information about a famous person, but don't say who it is, and the rest of the class will guess who this person is. So again, this task is really flexible. You can use it for anything. Now, another thing you can use to help your students with ideas and with ideas to speaking is to use ranking. If you learned some kind of words and phrases during the lesson, for example, genres of films or genres of TV shows at the lesson, you can give them a list of these genres as a separate task, and ask them to put them in the order of the most favorite to least favorite, or vice versa, and then explain why. So, well, it's they use Google Translate. Well, and then you have to set the task more clearly. You should really say that they shouldn't Google Translate. You will hear that really when they do that. So you just need to ask them to revise it. Even if they use it, they can go back to the ranking. They discuss why they chose it, why this one is the first one for them, why that one is the last one for them, and so on. Give them some time to think, and they will get back to you with different ideas. It can be again done with anything. For example, if it's the topic furniture, you can say that imagine that you've moved to a new apartment, but you can buy only one piece of furniture a week. And you give them a list of like 10 pieces of furniture. They should choose the first one, the second one, and so on. So, like, put them in the order that they need it, and explain why they choose. My students, like, some of them choose the fridge as number one, some of them choose the sofa as number one, and you can build a discussion on that. And one more is making lists. So it's again, it's just the idea, so you can tailor it around any topic you need. If you work in a group, you can divide your students in mini groups and ask them to choose like 3 dishes for, and then you give them a list of ideas for what. Like one group can choose 3 dishes for a romantic dinner for 2, and they need to discuss it in the group, make sure that they know why they chose these dishes, and then one person from the group, or they all, can just report back to the group and say, for example, we decided that for a romantic dinner for 2, we choose this dish, and this dish. We don't choose other dishes because, we choose this dish because, and so on. So it's really, it can be worked out on any level and with any topic. Or if you work one-to-one with a student, you can give them different situations and a task like that. So you give them situations, what clothes would you wear for, or would you wear to? And you give ideas, wedding reception, job interview, first date, I don't know, concerts, and so on. So they need to give you, for example, at least 3 words from your list that you've learned at this lesson, and then explain why. If your students have problems with making their speech longer, you can set the limits. So you can say, for example, you need to use at least 3 pieces of clothing in your speech. You need to explain at least with 2 sentences why, and so on. Each sentence should be at least 5 words, and so on. So it depends on the students. But really, this is how we can work. Okay, so I guess that now it's time for the questions. I guess that we've covered lots of different ideas, and again, this webinar was aimed at giving you the ideas, and how you will use them with your students. It depends on you, on the level of the students, on the books you use, and on the requirements you have at the institution that you work for. So, I see one question in the question section, and if you have any more, you can address them to the question section or in the chat, but better to the question. So Anna asks, if you try to correct a student during the speaking, the student feels uncomfortable. If I listen till the end, then we both may forget half of the mistakes. What should I do? Most of the examples that I gave you here were aimed at helping the students with fluency. So when they practice fluency, it's taboo. You can't correct them during their speech. Don't do that, because they won't speak, really. When your students speak, they should get ready that you're making notes. Yeah, so I always have a piece of paper on the right, yeah, because I'm right-handed, and a pencil. And while the student is speaking, I write down the most common mistakes. When you practice fluency, don't focus on all the mistakes. You need to focus on the mistakes that are on the first place. There should be mistakes that prevent understanding, when the student said something and you have no idea what he meant. So this is number 1. Then you use the mistakes in grammar and vocabulary, or mistakes in them, so you need to focus on correcting this. And also some pronunciation mistakes. Learn conditional sentences, yes, yet don't correct them, don't focus on that, really. So you just put down, for me it's, I don't mistakes, 1 column for vocabulary mistakes, 1 column for pronunciation mistakes, and then they put them down, you can visit it. What books can you recommend for speaking? I know there are some books with useful phrases, etc. Asks Yekaterina. Like books with ready-made tasks and activities for speaking. I can, after the webinar, I can give you some links and ideas, but really, when I get ready for the lesson and I need something to talk about, some interesting idea, I Google it, really. So, for example, I write down something like this. Second conditional speaking activity. Enter. And Google gives some really interesting ideas. Really, it comes with practice, but if you're interested, I can leave some links in the chat box, and you can look at them. So don't go away, or just wait a few more moments and you will see the links there. Books for speaking. Let me write it down, because I can forget. We have one more question. Lilia asks, no questions, okay. Thank you, Alexandra. Nice to see a graduate. Oh, you're also from Odessa. Well, yeah, that's nice. Nice to see you too. Yeah, that's great. Any more questions? Please. Nope. Any more questions? Okay then. So I hope that our webinar was really helpful. What we say to write? pronunciation mistakes, I mean, like I use well, I don't use a separate column, but you can use a separate columns for them. When there is a pronunciation mistake, I just write down the word where was the mistake, and after the student finishes speaking, well, I work online, so I give them this word in the chat box and ask them, like, can you read this word for me one more time, please? And the student knows that if I ask to read this word again, then there might be some problem with it. So if they can't read it, sometimes they correct their mistakes, so we have to give them opportunity to correct themselves. If they can't do that, of course, we give the right answer. Yeah. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I was really glad to see so many people today. If you wait just for a few moments, when I switch off the video, I will look for some interesting links for the books with pre-made activities to use for speaking. And I guess that this would be it. And if you want to, if you're interested in cooperation with our school, here you can see the links. The webinar, the recording of the webinar will appear, I guess, tomorrow, or at least on Friday, will appear on our YouTube channel. I'm not sure, but maybe it will be sent to you to your email with the presentation, and in the presentation these links will be clickable. Thank you everyone for participation. It was really a pleasure for me to see you all. Thank you so much. I hope I could be of any use to you and I hope to see you all again at some other webinars. So goodbye, and wish you a great evening. Bye-bye.